All right. Well, I'm going to start kicking things off while people start to join us. But for those of you who are here now, thank you for joining us. This has been a big year for everybody. And this is, I believe, our 29th weekly town hall series without fail since the pandemic started, when we really kicked off these educational events. Um, and I invite you to check out our website, and you'll see on the previous town halls tab, all of the content that we've published this year. We've got them recorded. Um, so it's a lot of really valuable stuff out there to help you kind of summarize and wrap up 2020, and wrap up this wild year, and get ready for 2021, which I think is going to be a big year. We've got a lot of big expectations. We've had obviously the pandemic, the election, just to scratch the surface. So I think you're going to see a lot of M&A activity. I think you're going to see a lot of maybe volatility in business valuations on good and bad. So our message there is to really educate yourself. That's what we do. We take an education based approach. So if you want help, or if you want to start planning what your future is going to look like, whether you're going to exit this year or in a few years, we're here. This is exactly what we do. A lot of preparation work goes into it. So, be aware of the advantages and things that you can utilize in 2021 to your favor, but also be cognizant of the obstacles that you're going to be facing, with whether it's regulatory or administrative changes. There's a lot out there, and make sure you try to know what you don't know now, is what I would say. But anyways, today we're wrapping it up with a really strong presentation from George Joseph, who we've actually had before on one of our panel series. But we're really thrilled to have George again, and focus more on his entrepreneurial endeavors. He is the epitome of a serial entrepreneur with an incredible track record. Just a few of his notable distinguishments are his Right Step rehab facility, which he started with, just 300,000 in revenue, and ended up selling years later with 300 employees for $35 million to a private equity group. And more, especially in Houston, if you would know him for Common Bond. You've probably passed by or have eaten at one of his 6 locations now, and he's started from one to now taking full control over the business, with over 300 employees now, and a lot more locations coming on, and he'll talk about that more in a minute. But really, just it's amazing to see someone be able to go from a rehab type facility to a Common Bond, and all the other endeavors that George has been so successful at. It really marks how you don't have to be industry specific to be a great entrepreneur, and really everything he touches, I don't want to jinx it, George, but everything you touch seems to turn to gold. And you really succeeded in all your endeavors. So I'm going to pass it over to you now, and I want tell us about it. Tell us how you got there.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate the opening. And I want to start with thanking Exit Advisors. Really pivoted during the pandemic to provide these webinars. And it's been really helpful. I've listened to them and participated in them. And Al and Gary and the guys there that really help small businesses and entrepreneurs to walk around the landmines, really, to try to get to what you want to try to accomplish. And for me, it's how to have a quality life, and not only for me, but for the employees that work with me, and then whatever services we provide. So I want to start with a quote that most people know. Is begin with the end in mind. And I think when you're thinking about Exit Advisors or selling a business or building a business, you have to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And even in a seminar, in like doing this webinar, like what what goals I'd like for you to get or accomplish from my talk. Well, one is you're going to obviously learn more about me, but also the mistakes. I mean, Andrew was very helpful and complimentary on some of my accomplishments, but it takes hard work, and with hard work, you make mistakes and you learn from the mistakes. The guys that make mistakes and don't learn from the mistakes are usually the ones that have failed businesses. So it hasn't been a perfect ride in any of the businesses, but it's learning from your mistakes and trying to avoid avoid mistakes by learning to move quickly when you do make a mistake. So I like the first slide. Whitney did a great job, our director of marketing from Common Bond. That's my dad and my mom. My mom's 94 years old last week. She's in a nursing home in Louisiana. She has a little bit of dementia, but we had a nice FaceTime because you can't visit in person anymore. And then that's my father, who was Lebanese. His father actually came from Lebanon and was a merchant. Lebanese tend to have a good business background and good business skills. My mom's father was my grandfather was a bootlegger and had bars. So when you got a Cajun and a Lebanese, it created quite a mix with me here in Houston once I got here in 1987. So I was born in a small town. If you want to go to the next slide, it has a little surprise, I think. Can you hear the music? The music playing. Thank you for that, Andrew. Basically, small town. I wonder why entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs I know are successful are from small towns. And I don't know if there's any correlation to that. I had a friend that wants to actually write a book of people from small towns that became quite successful. 2,500 people, I think it's still 2,500 people in Lafourche Parish. I was just grateful, small upbringing. My parents, like I said, my grandfather came, he was a trader, mostly in clothes. So my uncles had clothing stores. I worked when I was 10, 12, 13, 14 years old, worked in the stores. So I think I always had kind of that business background and the love for business and, work. I think I gained a good work ethic. And so from being on the Bayou, I unfortunately got heavily into drugs and alcohol and got sober at age 19 and didn't know what I was going to be. I wanted to be business, but in my rehabilitation process, my counselors actually thought I'd make a great counselor. And so I ended up becoming a licensed chemical dependency counselor and have dedicated my whole life from basically age 23 to now on helping people. And so I was very, very grateful. And part of that process in my early career, I was able to get involved with the Right Step. It was a drug and alcohol rehab facility. I was in my 20s. And basically the guys who were running it, if you want to change the slide, Andrew, basically the guys who were running it came to me and said, hey, we want to give you 25% of this business that was basically bankrupt. And like Andrew said earlier, it was maybe 15, 8, 10 employees and probably 300,000 or so in revenue. And it was in the Montrose area. And so I just kind of, even though I was young as a CEO or president, whatever my first title was, and even though it was probably not a good logical decision at the time to get 25% of a company that's about to go under, I did see the potential of it. And so as I was building that business and learning from it, I knew I kind of followed the Southwest Airlines model. And basically we opened facilities in Austin, in Dallas, Fort Worth, and in San Antonio. And we also dealt with insurance companies, and the insurance companies typically like to deal with one vendor that has multiple locations and multiple levels of care. That if you're in Texas, you most likely nowadays have Aetna, Blue Cross, or United Healthcare as your healthcare provider. And so I had a good opportunity to take something and turn it around. And it turned into 20 years of work or 19 years of work before I ended up selling it. And some of the things I learned that I really made mistakes on in my early career, early years, was in technology and in human resource, because every business, that's two areas that really get sometimes overlooked. The technology obviously is always changing, and every time I dealt with a technology provider or learned more about different technologies, it was always about, yes, we can buy your technology, but will the employees use 5% of it, 10% of it, 20%? How do you help to train us as employees to use the full breadth of the technology? So I think that was probably a big learning area in the beginning, is how to effectively use the technology. Like, we created electronic medical record for ourselves because we couldn't find anything on the market. And, obviously we made a lot of mistakes learning about it, but we tailored it to our business and, dealing with programmers and learning that stuff. So I think technology is always something to be on your forefront when you're starting a business or when you're in a business, is how can I make the right investment? But more importantly, how can I push the tech guys to educate the employees to fully utilize the technology? I still think that's a really a lapse in our business world, that there's great technology, but not all employees fully utilize it. And then human resource. My first human resource person was basically the person who did the finances, because they know the salaries, but they're not always the best people from dealing with employees. And so early on, we had a lot of challenges because the lady who dealt with the money was not the most personable person to deal with as far as employee issues. And so I always think about the learnings from that lack of investment. And so finally, when we did hire a human resource person, it did help with a lot of the issues, personnel issues, and it helps with motivation. I think an effective human resource person guides you to pick the right people in the right seats in the bus. They can help you hopefully move on people that are unproductive quicker, and that you're a little slower to hire, so that you hire the right people. So that was some great learnings for me on that aspect of it. The next thing I want to talk about, when I sold in 2012, I gave a large sum of money to all the employees. And, the funny thing that they remembered the most, now seeing them, 8 years later, and whenever I see them or talk to them, they remember the birthday cards. And what I did about the birthday cards is that every employee, I would sign a birthday card and put $20 cash in it. And so it's, there were days I get these long stacks every month. I get a stack of cards, and when you get up to 300 employees, it's quite a chore to maneuver all that stuff. But what I really liked is that it felt good for me to be able to connect with that employee, especially if it's like an entry level employee, or somebody that maybe working in the cafeteria, or somebody that I may not interact with that much, but it made some impact. And so as we built the culture, these little things, sometimes we think about it's always big things that employees want, and obviously pay is important to people, but in this process of the birthday cards, it made a nice impact. And so with Common Bond, I wanted to start the process, and the HR and the finance people were like, "You sure you want to do this?" And they were worried about putting cash in the birthday cards, and I'm like, "No, this is something that's important." So we now implemented at Positive Recovery and also at Common Bond. And another thing I did that I really enjoyed back then is, and we do now, is that we had employees read a book every year. And this is kind of where it goes into the culture and making a difference. We had one year, it was a book called, it was actually now 10 years old, Delivering Happiness. Tony Shea, and poor guy was killed recently in a fire. But what a leader. He started Zappos and then created this book, Delivering Happiness. And every employee would have to write a little paragraph to me about the book, and I'd give them a little cash for reading the book. And, it's funny, even though you give them a little money, I think it was $50 or something like that, some of the employees, just nervousness or not wanting to do it, didn't turn in their reports. And so after the deadline, we then basically made it part of their job responsibility to read the book and turn in the assignment to make sure everybody got the full culture and experience of it. And as a result of that, we worked on our core values, and we worked on it from the bottom up. Basically, we created committees to create the values, and we used some of the ones that he had. He has one that's about creating a little weirdness, and so ours may be having fun and loving what we do. So we may have tweaked the words, but the effort from that was important to use. And so in that book, they has a large section from Dr. Martin Seligman at University of Penn. He actually created a master's program called Positive Psychology. And our physician, Jason Powers, MD, actually looked into that program and signed up for it as a result of reading this book, Delivering Happiness. So if you haven't written a book, I recommend you do it, because it does talk about, one, happiness of you as a person, even for whatever job you do or whatever you do in your life. But number two, it helps to create the culture of your company. And so Dr. Powers ended up enrolling in University of Penn and created a curriculum based on the positive psychology called Positive Recovery. And after I sold my company in 2012 and my non-compete ended and I wanted to restart another rehab program, I was thinking about what name I would use and how I would want to operate it. And so I called Dr. Powers and said, hey, I want to start this company, and I want to basically buy your name and hopefully buy your curriculum, and hopefully you come back to work for me, in which he did. He's our chief medical officer at Positive Recovery Center. So I just love that, that story of what he did with Zappos. And obviously, our company wasn't the size of Zappos, but we actually, Dr. Powers and I actually toured. They give you free tours to go learn about Zappos. And so it was in Vegas, and we went on a tour, and Zappos is basically a call center. Their distribution was in Kentucky, but their operation or their business was in Vegas. And so he and I were able to go to basically this call center and meet people, and got a tour, and they had basically classes on what they were trying to accomplish and about their core values. And we spent the whole day with them. And what was so impressive is that each section or area was basically cubicles, but they allowed them to decorate them. So each, we'd go into one area and it's maybe like a Star Wars theme, and we'd go into another area, maybe a different theme, or each little employee had their own way of decorating their cubicles. And Tony was right in the middle of the cubicles. He wasn't in an office in the corner. And so it was really an impressive experience. And then the last thing that I liked about him is that basically when you go to orientation at Zappos, at the end of your orientation, they give you a challenge that you can leave and take $1,000 and go away, or you can stay and become an employee if choose to do that. And basically not many people take the $1,000. I don't even know how many people with their percentages, but what they said back then was there's very few, if any, people took that $1,000. So they basically put their money where their mouth is about wanting to work there, and obviously had engaged employees, and they didn't time them on the calls when they called in. And so supposedly there were some stories about them really helping other people if they might be having, but besides buying troubles, besides buying shoes, they talked about their troubles and helped them. And so it was quite interesting to do all that stuff and to see it in action. So it brings me to, in building a business, my whole basically adult life in an industry that I really enjoyed and really found satisfaction in, and obviously helped me as well. It always had a thing in the back of my mind is, am I a good business person? Am I a good entrepreneur, or I just know the industry? And so you can go to the next slide if you want, Andrew. And basically, knowing the difference between the business and can it be duplicated in other industries? And so Gary asked me a question earlier today about how do I able to juggle a rehab center and restaurants. And it kind of goes back to, I think, my learnings about culture, about building a strong team, about execution, about customer service. And so I like Tony's quote here. There's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. So it's not rocket science what I do each day, but it's empowering the people that work with me, and then always trying to maximize your, obviously, your abilities, and also really focus on customer service, and doing the right thing, and making sure your staff kind of follows your same values. And so it helped me to figure out that, yeah, I knew the addiction world, I knew the treatment centers from inside and outside, but also that they were, thriving businesses, and that I had to make sure that the business was running well, and that the quality of care and the marketing and the business side of it and the financial side is all in sync with each other. Sometimes I see companies, they either get too focused on the financial part and not necessarily on the customer service part, or some that are more worried about customer service, but they don't take care of their money, and then they wonder why they have cash flow issues. So I think part of business is the juggling and the balancing of all the different uh, cylinders, as you would say, in running the engine of running a business. So I'm glad to see that even during the pandemic, and with these new businesses, which are right in the middle of their growth spurts, I was able to continue to move forward on the basically the learnings I had on running a business. So we go to the next slide. Knowing when to exit. So I'm kind of honoring him today with the slides, but we must all learn not only to not fear change, but to embrace it enthusiastically, and perhaps even more important, encourage and drive it. And for me, I had been in the business for a long time, and I ran the Right Step for a long time. So I got to a point where I think it was a time for me and I grew the business to a certain point where it was time to move to the next level. To, basically, when you put your heart and soul and every dollar into a business, you want to, you want to turn it into liquefy, basically, is what a lot of business people talk about. And so for me, it got to the point where I felt like a larger company could potentially, build it to another level. And sometimes, nothing against private equity, but sometimes they screw things up, and there's probably just as many stories where they screw things up when they don't really necessarily need to. And so when I went to sell, I took bids from basically 3 groups, and they were all private equity backed. And what I learned from it, one is that, they're smart MBA guys that you negotiate with, but if they don't understand culture, and they don't understand the business, and they just looking at the spreadsheets, it's not going to turn out well. And the company I sold to in 2012, after about 6 years, they filed Chapter 11. And it's, the sad part is that they didn't have to file Chapter 11 because it was all based on their mistakes and how they executed the purchases. They were basically became one of the largest drug and alcohol providers in the states. And simple things that people don't always realize the importance of them, but how I think they affect the karma. So like, our company was basically Texas based, and they had facilities in California, Tennessee, Florida. I mean, they were all over the country. And so when it came down to the transition of just something simple as like the 401k plan, we had a matching 401k, and the rest of their facilities did not match the 401k. So they, instead of raising the level for the rest of the company, they stooped it down to the Right Step employees. And so they lost their match. Things like we would, we had 5 residential facilities at the time. And so all the employees could eat for free. Well, that's a small price to pay. You're already feeding the patients. They're already in the cafeterias. They're around the staff. I think it's good for the morale for the staff. It's good for the employees. I mean, the patients, to see the staff eating, seeing their humanness about them. And when they took over, that was one of the things they took out. They quit serving free food to the employees. So like, why sometimes we allow the bean counters to make the decisions that can affect the long run? Yeah, they probably did save money, but did they really enhance the company? So as you're building your business, I think you got to make that decision. Am I enhancing the company, or am I just saving dollars? Or am I saving dollars without not maybe enhancing, but is it a neutral decision that it's not going to decline the company? Whereas I think things like what they did with the food and the 401k declined the business. And the great news is that as they were in Chapter 11, they had closed a lot of their facilities around the country, but the Texas part of it, the model that we created, was the basics of the engine of what was bought by obviously another private equity company. So I kept the other good thing to do is, if you have a company, try to own your real estate. If it's especially if it's complex real estate where it's things that are, that you have some permanentness about it, or it's not easy to move. So we purposely made sure that I bought the facilities that were the residential facilities where you had to have licensing and fire safety systems and things like that. So those facilities I had owned and leased back to the operating company. And so when I sold, I kept that and then signed a lease back to them. And the good news is that they paid all their rent, even during Chapter 11. And then during the Chapter 11, I gave them a 4-month clause that they can exit any of the facilities. So they've exited 3 out of the 5 facilities, and as they've exited them, I've rebranded them to my new company. So when people say, "Did you buy your company back?" I said, "No, I didn't buy my company back. I just got the real estate back and rebranded it." So I really, you can go to the next slide. I really just took advantage of the opportunities. I didn't plan to, get back into the business, but the opportunities kind of showed themselves. Andrew, can you go to the next slide? So after you sell, you have this time on your hands of trying to figure out what to do and what to do next. You go from a 50, 16-hour week job to having some more freedom. You have, your shoulders are lifted because you don't have as many employees you're responsible for. And so I just took some time away. But, I think when you have the entrepreneurial spirit, or at least for me, I wanted to do more and to be productive. And so I ended up basically working on a few things. I had a 4.5-year non-compete. And, during that non-compete, I was like looking at what opportunities there are there. I mean, yes, you can take your money and make investments, but as we all know, with like stock market and things like that, it's so volatile. Whereas I feel like I have a stronger belief in my own abilities. And, now when in the pandemic, it would have been nice not to be working, but it was part of my nature. And so we can go to the next slide. And so basically in 2014, I created a company that did the electronic medical records for drug and alcohol rehabs, Lightning Step. Now it's doing really, really well. I still the founder and still 25% owner, but I've diversified some of that company, and we use that technology at our positive recovery centers. I ended up having a friend who said, "Hey, can you meet the chef at Common Bond?" I'd never been to Common Bond, and he's having trouble with his partners. And so I met the chef, a guy named Roy Schwartzapfel, most talented guy. And so I met with him. It's one of those things like the Hair Club for Men. It's like the more he talked, I went try the restaurant. I could see the business problems like parking and closing early and those things. So I got into the business by going to basically the owners. The lady was 75 years old that helped start it, and they did a great job with the recipes and the things like that. Roy ended up going back to New York and then now he's actually in Oakland selling Pantones online. Really great product, and I'm still keep in touch with them. And basically came in there and said, "All right, I'm going to purchase your business, but it's not worth, unfortunately, what you've invested, because they went to Germany and got the best equipment and they had all these great things, but the kitchen was a little too small and they had some challenges to operate. And so I ended up going, talked to a friend, Johnny Caraba, and said, "Hey man, I need some advice. I'm thinking about buying this bakery." And he said, "Oh, I'll go help. I'll help. Let me go sit there and tell you what I think." And that ended up where he and I became partners, basically in I think it's actually 2015. It opened in June of 2014. So my date is wrong on there. It's 2015. And so he and I basically were partners until the end of 20, getting my years back, basically 2018. I bought him out and was just as more of a silent partner, and he was operating Common Bond. And so from basically all of 2019 and 2020, I've been building the business, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But then and then the rehab business, like I said earlier, when the group went chapter 11, it created some opportunities to take some of my facilities back, and we got with Dr. Powers and we rebranded it Common Positive Recovery Centers, and we have facilities in, and they were about to close all the outpatient offices that they had left that I had sold them. And so basically we took all those back, and now we're up to, I guess, 13 locations in Austin, San Antonio, San Marcos, throughout the Houston area, and in 3 inpatient facilities in Spicewood. We're about to open in January in the Hill Country, and then in Garden Oaks and in the Montrose area. So I love helping people, and so it's been a blessing to reopen those facilities. We can go to the next slide. So Common Bond, it's funny, it's as much work as we do in the rehab business, I get more attention, I think, because of Common Bond, the notoriety, and also just the flashiness of restaurants, even though it's not the best to be in a restaurant business during a pandemic, I could tell you that for sure. But I loved his quote here: "Your personal core values define who you are, and the company core values ultimately define the company's character and brand. For individuals, character is destiny. For organization, culture is destiny." And what we've tried to do, and obviously it started in Montrose, and now we have 6 locations, but is to continue the brand quality of the product, and then obviously the employees, in the front of it, we call it the front of the house, the people that serve you as you go through the line, usually a lot younger folks in their 20s, and then usually the cooks in the back are maybe tend to be a tad older, but in a large group of them are Hispanic. So we make sure all our literature is in English and in Spanish. But what we've tried to accomplish once I took it over in January is that we had already moved out of that kitchen, or started doing a lot of our products in a commissary. And once you have a commissary, your expenses go way up, but it ensures your quality. So basically every morning we have trucks delivering to the bistros and the bakeries at 6:00 a.m. to bring the highest quality product and the freshest product, because they basically start baking early, like late at night and early in the morning, to make sure it's the freshest. And so the growth of Common Bond has been one that we have a great following, almost like a cult following of people that love our products. Social media obviously is very important. Our Instagram is I guess getting close to 30,000 followers, so it allows you to show your product, let people know what's available, and attract more customers. And so as we were building the business, opening these restaurants, we opened 3 during the pandemic, and we have about 9 more on the drawing board that we're opening next year. It's like we couldn't stop ourselves. When you're in the middle of a pandemic like we had, it's like luckily we had the wherewithal to be able to get through this, and because we're fast casual, it really allowed us to not get as hit as hard as like the real fine dining restaurants that people didn't want to, may not feel comfortable going inside, and the food doesn't travel as well. So we did very, very little takeout and curbside. In fact, we discouraged it because our lines were so long a lot of times. But Uber Eats actually was meeting with me maybe the week before the pandemic and said, hey, look, we get so many requests for Common Bond. We really like you to be in our plan. And I'm like, well, I can't afford you. You guys charge way too much. The margins on a fast casual are very small. And she said, no, we'll negotiate with you. So we ended up negotiating something. And like the next week, and she said, well, all right, we'll send the photographer, we'll take pictures, we'll post all this stuff on our site, on our app, so people can order, from Common Bond, and we'll, deliver it for you. And the pandemic hit. So we were like I called her and said, hey, look, we have pictures. Can we send you the pictures? Can you get us on your app? And, DoorDash and Favor. And so we went after all those providers to help us to sell food out the door. And so I know one of the questions on people's mind is what's next. And so for us, my hope is that we continue to keep some of that to-go curbside delivery business and adds to what we were already doing currently in our restaurants. And so you could go to the next slide, Andrew, please. And so during the pandemic, one of the things I had already planned to do is to work towards a drive-through. And so we ended up finding this restaurant here at 601 Heights that used to be called Lee's Chicken and Donuts, that was basically going out of business. And we ended up assuming their lease and converting it right during the pandemic. And my wife was always leery about me getting out too much back then. And so I remember just going to see the building and with the mask on and with the contractors and getting things ready and painting it and working together to work through it. And it's been really interesting. That picture is a little old. We've added a patio, and originally it was 80% drive-through and 20% in the door. And now it's closer to 60-40 because we added the patio, and the neighbors have really taken, walking over there to get their pastries, and we have grab and go salads and sandwiches and things like that. So we've been really fortunate, and with this model, we're trying to expand it. So we currently have one in Garden Oaks that's in renovation right on Shepherd and 34th. And then we have one at the Marquee that's in permitting. And then we have a few others that are planned. So this is kind of Common Bond's future. It's basically the food is delivered every day in the morning and then sold and then throughout the day. And it's basically open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So we're very excited about it. We created a frozen bond. I see she put on the slides, which is a kind of like a Frappuccino that we provide, and it's only at on the goes. And then right during the middle of the pandemic, we built our most magnificent, beautiful restaurant in the Bank of America Tower. It's a brand new building in 800 Capitol. And we have chosen to only open it as a pop-up. So you see the part on the slide that's it's basically open from 7 to 2 p.m. now, Monday through Friday. And then to the right of it is a full scale fine dining restaurant called a brasserie. And we're not choosing not to open it until downtown comes back to life. And it's been a struggle. The landlord has been fairly supportive, but obviously they like rent sooner or later. And then we were right in the middle of building it. So it was like, I went to them and said, hey, do you want us to stop the construction? Or do you want us to continue? But I'm not sure when we would open. And so that's basically where we stand. That's our flagship location. We're anxious to see what happens to downtown. It's the Waste Management's headquarters. It's Bank of America's headquarters. It's got 5 tunnels coming in to this location. So we're anxious to see what happens, but I'm not in a hurry to open the fine dining yet until we get further along. All right, I think we go to the last slide, then we can start taking some questions. It's kind of a simple Louisiana mentality, but we were motivated by usually in 2 ways, either seeing the light or feeling the heat. And then one of my employees said this yesterday, because we're in the middle of our accreditation audits, and she said, teamwork makes the dream work. So what I liked about the heat part is that when the pandemic started, I am the one that answers all the Instagram comments for Common Bond. And I just took that on. My wife's not happy about it, but I took it on just because when the pandemic hit, the heat obviously turned on me. I had to, obviously dig in my pocket. I didn't want to lay anybody off. I cut salaries in the beginning, and then once we got the PPP money, we went back and we reimbursed everybody for their cuts. But when you have a strong culture, you can make cuts if you need to. And I did not see any kind of change in the quality of the work that people were doing. It was just amazing. It's, as the owner, you feel so gratified when you see that you have to make the painful decision to make a cut, and then then you go next, and no one quits. They don't run. They work as hard. They realize what's going on. And then when the PPP money came in, and I went back and paid everybody all their cuts back, the gratitude, and it just really, it warms your heart to see those kind of things when it happens. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story. It's always good for me to hear. And then I'll go over some of the questions that have come in. What's the most important thing that you do to start your workday to ensure that you, oh, you got cut off. I'm not sure what it said. All right. I printed this.
What's the most important thing that you do to start your workday to ensure that you are the best decision maker you can be?
I love this little app called Insight Timer. It's my wife. I played it for my wife. She's a yogi person, so she doesn't think it's meditation. I think it's kind of meditation, but maybe it's more visualization. And so when I am at my best, I start with that Insight Timer. And she also laughs at me because I'm also trying to do a plank I've been averaging a plank for 3 minutes a day. And so one of the meditations is 6 minutes. So my goal is to plank during the whole meditation. And so I think it's body, mind, and spirit. I think if you're strong in those three areas, I work out with a trainer in the morning before I get started a couple of days a week. So I think those things help me to make better decisions. So I hope, that's kind of, for me, it works. The next one is, what do you think the new normal for service businesses post-pandemic? Well, hopefully, one thing I want to say is the loyalty, your memories, and the changes that happen. I think that when the going gets tough, you see the character of people. And I'll say this as an example. So I have one landlord. When March came, we went to our landlord and said, look, we're going to need help. The inside, the dining rooms are all shut down. Can you please help us? And most everyone was, like, yeah, let's see what happens. Obviously people back then thought it would be a month or two. It wouldn't last as long as it has. So they're not maybe as generous now. But so I had one landlord said, hey, we decided to give you half your rent off in April. I'm like, thank you. I'll take whatever I can get. Well, then once they found out about the PPP money, he calls me and says, hey, listen, you're going to get some government money. I'm like, great. I take any help I can get. I want to make sure we keep people employed. And he says, and if we do, I'd like you to pay me back the money that I discounted you. At that time, I'm like, I didn't even think I'd get government money. We didn't know what was going to happen. The earth was, the world was falling. So he says, I'm going to send you an email to confirm that you will do this. And I'm like, sure, no problem. So I confirmed it. Obviously, I paid him. And when the PPP money ended and we were back in the same boat because the dining rooms wouldn't open yet, I said, hey, I'd like to take advantage of my half month off for June. And they said, oh, no, we're not giving any more discounts. I'm like, you gave me one and I paid you back. Can I take advantage of it? So the point of the story is that lease is up in 3 years and we will definitely move that restaurant, because to me, the character of a person during the toughest times are the ones that you have to look out for. So I studied all the employees, how they managed through this, the ones that really stepped up. The service business, yes, it's going to be a little bit different, but I think the pivot is that for us, like takeout service, but for alcohol and drug treatment, I think people are going to need more help at post-pandemic because of the drinking's increased and the drug use has increased. So I think it's just that every day, every month, things are changing about how people, do things. They fill up the movie theaters in the future? I think eventually they will, but it just may take time before we get back to some normalcy. It just may be looking a little different on some of the ways people spend their money. I think the beauty of the pandemic is that hopefully, people spent more time with their families. They've learned to do things that, more fun, be outside more. I mean, we went to uh, what is it? Went up to Montana this summer. We drove. We would have never driven before, but we basically took a road trip to Montana and went to Yellowstone, and basically it was full of tourists because it was probably people that would have been going to Europe that were now at Yellowstone under, realizing nature. So again, the next question was most effective way to reach customers. I think for us, it just depends on the business, but in restaurants, social media has gotten to be a really important thing. I think from a rehab business, we have to have actually sales and marketing people out in the community, and it's challenging because now they're having to meet people on Zoom, but they're, getting out to tell them what services we can offer. So I think it has to be tailored to the business that you have, but it's how, it's kind of like the storybook brand book, I think is what it is. You got to kind of put yourself in your customers' shoes of what they would be looking for and how they would be looking for it. Sometimes as a business owner, we want to give them all our information and look how great we are, but it's not maybe necessarily what they're looking to get answered or to with some of their reasoning. The next question is, what business preparations are you making now for 2021? It's pretty simple. It's cash is king. So you got to look at every way you can save dollars. My president called me the other day. He said, look, we can buy extra Topo Chico if we buy it larger quantities. And I'm like, well, how much Topo Chico we sell every month? And he told me, and I said, well, I think that's the answer. And so we bought larger amounts of Topo Chico. And so I think it's like the businesses that have cash will do better in the tough times and then hopefully do better in the good times. The saddest point is when you have a good product and you don't have money to execute what you want to execute. So for me, the business preparations are that we're looking for opportunities. There have been some potential opportunities on our plate of places that are struggling that we could potentially rebrand from the common bond aspect of it. And obviously positive recovery as they give us back the facilities, we rebranded them. And so it gives you opportunities to be nimble. I think you look for the opportunities as they come up because there are some great businesses, sadly, that will not see the end of 2021. They will not see the end of the pandemic and make sure that you're able to execute it. You don't want to take on a business that you can't execute, but look at why the business failed. Is it because they didn't have the customers, or is it because they couldn't execute, or was their pricing wrong? Was the demand wrong? So there's a lot to think about in 2021. We're hoping that we get past our herd immunity, maybe toward the summer or early fall next year. So we got some time to ride through this and trying to make it through here. Let's see, we got another question.
Yeah, we got another from Chris, and we were discussing, what's the best way to, acquire new capital or build up and increase your revenue so that you can make purchases on other companies. And it's kind of two different ways. One's, reinvesting into new businesses. One's taking external capital. What do you prefer, and how have you done it?
I try not to take outside capital because you lose some autonomy, but obviously you need to sometimes, and so bank loans if you can, and I guess investors if you can as well. We did a raise on Next Seed. It's expensive money, but we raised some money for our Garden Oaks facility, and luckily it sold out in 47 minutes. It set a record for them. But ideally is if you have a business and you can grow your business without taking on a lot more expense, it's the most effective way. is to grow what you currently have. Now, if you want to acquire a business, like I said just a few minutes ago, you really have to look at why that business is being acquired. Is it, we're talking to a guy now for about a restaurant, and basically he was pretty direct with me. He said, if it wasn't for the pandemic, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So there are people that are out there that are really hurting, that need help. I'm not sure if the government will give us another round of help, but that need help, that are good businesses, but they didn't have the deep enough pockets. And it's a great learning lesson for me, is how much capital in your business do you have? It's been such a go economy that I think a lot of businesses were running thin, and they're putting a lot of money in their pockets, or they really wasn't saving for either expansion or downturn. And so I think the more you can be prepared in that area, I think the better off you'll be. I
Awesome.
think that's
Well,
it.
I'll give everyone a second if there's any last minute questions. Shoot them over now. But in the meantime, I'll say, what's your closing point of kind of similar to the last question about business preparations for 2021, but for you personally, or even for your business, what's number one thing on your radar that you're going to be looking for in 2021?
I think for me, it's just, Common Bond. We're obviously still in the middle of expansion because we have more to open, more locations to justify our commissary. For Positive Recovery, it's, just more opportunities to have facilities and to, be prepared as the pandemic wears down, that people want to get help, that we're there and available to help them. So, every day is changing. I mean, obviously the stock market went to, seemed like it was going to zero, and then all of a sudden the government throws money in, and then bills back up. So you just never know. It's like you have to be nimble. I guess that, pivot. People like to talk about pivot and nimble. I think 2021, it's not gonna. All our problems are not gonna just go away on January 1st. We still have to work through all these issues that we've been working through since March. And there is a lot of new normal, and how people behave and act, and how they'll change. And hopefully we'll keep the virus under control until we can get herd immunity. So I think it's being safe, keeping your employees safe as you can, and doing the best job of customer service. We bought my wife a new lease in April. Her lease was up, and man, I got to tell you, the dealership, not only we never went in the dealership, we negotiated by phone and text, and they delivered, and we signed everything online. So I think it's however you can make it user friendly for your customers, the better off you're going to be.
Well said. Well, George, thank you so much for sharing everything with us today. And in the past, you've been a really great friend to Exit Advisors, and we love having you. And probably we'll try to ask you to get on again sometime in the future, maybe later in 2021.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all what y'all doing for small businesses, and helping the entrepreneur to make it through these treacherous waters. But we are an amazing city, and we got a great can-do spirit in Houston, and I just love everybody moving forward and taking it as best we can.
Yeah, and thank everyone for joining us. For all of these weeks that we've been doing this. We are going to continue doing it into 2021. Probably a little bit of a different format. We're going to be doing one kind of educational series each month, and one featured entrepreneur of the month. So you can hear from other people like George, other entrepreneurs that have been really good at what they do. So look out for those. We will keep you posted. We'll be reaching out, but hope everyone has a great end of the year, and starts preparing for 2021. Looking forward to it. Bye, guys.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.